At the beginning of our movie, we see a man crying at a peak of a cold mountain. He was looking around for some food, and he saw a goat, tried to hunt the goat, but the goat got away. But he found a frog and made the frog his dinner. And then we see him walking into a gas station and putting a bunch of food in his basket. And then he would go up to the cashier, and he would tell him that he lost his wallet and to find some kind of solution. The cashier seems very cautious about this man because he looks like a wild man. And he asked him if he was okay, but Martin said that all he needed was his groceries, a pack of cigarettes, and some drinks. And then they started to go back and forth about his age, and he asked the cashier if he looks like an underage boy. And then he came up with a solution to pay for his groceries. And the solution was a barter system. Martin offered him his axe and some deer skin for the groceries, cigars, and beer. And suddenly the manager of the store came from the back and told Martin that he needed to pay with real money. And when Martin insisted on using the barter system, the manager attacked him with a bat. They started fighting, and Martin took his bat away and he hit the manager with his own bat. And after the manager fell to the ground, Martin told the cashier to take care and ran out of the store. And then we see three men, Simon, Musa, and Bashir, traveling to Guadalin. And Musa, one of these men, seemed to be in a really bad mood, and when he turned around to ask for a cigarette, they accidentally run into a deer and they crash. Musa called on Simon and checked on Bashir, but it seemed like it was too late because they were both gone at this point. And Musa took a bag from the back seat and left the car limping. And Martin was having a normal day in his tent when he saw a bloodied handprint on a branch. And then he discovered Musa unconscious. He started poking him with a stick, and he eventually woke him up. And then Martin offered Musa to come with him and call for help, but Musa declined. And then Martin offered to stitch up Musa's injured leg, and he took him to the camp. And Martin thought that Musa was hiking, and that's how he ended up here with the injury. And Musa liked that idea, and he told him, yeah, this is my first hike, and that's exactly what happened. And when Musa asked Martin how long he's been here in this camp, he told him that it's only been 10 days. Martin tried everything in the world from cycling to martial arts and a lot of other things to be happy, but nothing ever seemed to work. So he came here to figure it all out. And Musa discovered that the bag that he took from the backseat of the car was actually full of money, and he used it that night as a pillow when he was sleeping in Martin's tent. Our scene then shifts to Officer Oyvind, who goes inside a restaurant and asks for a French hot dog, and then inquires about Martin and his lifestyle. The manager tells him that he's a middle-aged man with brown hair, and Martin, according to the manager, resembles a Danish homeless wild man. Oyvind showed the manager a few photos of three suspects and asked him if any of them were the attacker, and the manager said no. Oyvind then went out of the restaurant, and he went to the crash site and started investigating. And after noticing a few clues, he sent two officers to investigate further. And meanwhile, Musa and Martin were making friends. They were having conversations, and Musa was asking Martin when he would return home. And Martin responds in a very surprising way and tells Musa that he's never returning home. He hates his life back home and his job. He doesn't want to go back. And then Musa told Martin that there's this place where people don't use electricity, mailboxes, or toilets, and that it's called Guadalin. And this place interested Martin, so he went inside his tent to search for it. But there he saw a lot of messages and missed calls from his wife. And she unexpectedly called him again, and he told her that he was in a meeting and went out of his tent to talk to her. Apparently he lied to his wife about his whereabouts. But I guess when you decide to live in the forest like a wild man, you kind of have to lie. Yeah. And as he was talking to her, he heard something coming from the back, and when he went over there to check it out, it was the two officers that Officer Oyvind sent, and they've apparently found Musa. Martin quickly hid from the officers, and he pointed his bow at them. And then he told Musa to tie them up using their own cuffs. And then Martin told them that he was just angry and that the manager was the one who attacked him first, and that he didn't really want to attack anyone. And then he collected his things from his tent, and him and Musa ran away. Martin confessed to Musa that the police were looking for him, and that was because he attacked someone in a store. And he was feeling really bad about what he did, and Musa asked him how he felt when he aimed the bow at the police officers. And Martin said that he's never felt more alive. And then they both decided to travel to Guadalin together. And then we see a man arguing with a woman in a car. And then they see these two criminals asking them for help. The man pulls over to help them. And the woman seems a little reluctant, especially because one of them is an immigrant. And apparently these two criminals were Simon and Bashir. And Simon told them that he needed to make a call and asked for a phone. He actually pushed out the guy and he started the engine. That's when the woman started crying. And when you think that these two are actually evil and Simon and Bashir are gonna take this woman on a ride along, no, they don't do that. They actually stop the car and they let her get off. And then we see Officer Oyvind, who finds the two officers that Martin tied up. And when he asked them what happened, they tell him that they met a Viking and that he's the one that did this to them. And Martin and Musa camped at this forest and they started talking about their lives back home. Musa told Martin that he didn't really have a permanent job and that he really needed to figure out his life. Musa also has a son who will be 2 years old in about 2 days. But Musa has never really seen his son because he doesn't really get along with the mother. And then Martin started talking about the 700 BC, where women kept their people together and the men were just hunting and they were always alone. It seems as if Martin wants to live that kind of Viking-style life. He doesn't really like modern society. And hearing this, Musa asked him if he was too high because they were smoking a joint when they were talking, and because this just seems too crazy, even for a high person. And after spending the night in the forest, the next morning they continued their journey, and they found themselves beside a stream. Musa wanted to take another route out of fear of drowning and getting his things wet, but Martin was trying to figure out a way to cross it. But then they both agreed to go around the stream. And then we see Officer Oyvind and Anne, Martin's wife. She got called into the police station, and Officer Oyvind started asking about Martin, and she told him that everything was normal, and that one morning he came over and told her that he was going away for some team-building seminar. And Officer Oyvind asked Anne if Martin has ever showed violent tendencies or a violent form of behavior, and she said no. And then he showed her the footage of Martin in a gas station, and she was very confused by what she saw because she's never seen Martin that way. And Officer Oyvind told her everything, the fact that Martin attacked 2 police officers, and that he believes him to be a very dangerous individual now. And Martin and Musa actually got lost in the mountains this time, and they began to argue, and all of a sudden Musa pulled out a gun that he took from one of the cops and fired it. And to their luck, apparently he shot a goat and they were very hungry and they ended up cooking the goat. And after they had their fill, Martin appreciated Musa's cooking skills and even told him to open up a restaurant because this guy is talented. And after all of this, they decided to continue their journey to Guadalajara. And when they arrived there, they met the leader and he told them a little information about how they lived and the lifestyle, and he welcomed them. And there, Martin began his search for food. And he asked this girl, Christine, for some meat, and she told him to pay with cash, MasterCard, or Visa. And he was very much so stunned because he didn't expect this. He thought this place was like an off-the-grid location where people lived like Vikings, like basically savage animals. And Musa was okay with paying, and he did pay. But Martin refused. And then he just took some bread and went out the front door, only to find modern people living their lives and having a good time. And then the leader called after Martin and asked him what he was doing. And Martin informed him that this was not how the Vikings lived. And the leader told him to give back what he stole or else he'd call the cops. The two ended up fighting, after which Martin ended up in cuffs. And when Musa returned, he saw Martin all tied up, and then he began shooting towards the sky. And because he had a gun and the other people didn't, Musa took the leader's car and Martin and they left together. And Bashir and Simon, who are now alive, were actually looking for Musa because he had the bag full of money. And they asked the receptionist about Musa's whereabouts, and they told her to tell them if she saw him, because they wanted to surprise him for his birthday. At least that's what they claimed. And Officer Oyvind went to this place called Guandalin, and he inquired about Martin. And the leader told him that he stole his car and that his phone was still inside. And then the police officers started to look for Martin because he was now a person of interest. And at this moment in time, Martin and Musa were actually doing some B&E. That's breaking and entering, for those of you who don't know. And they did that because they were going to tend to Musa's wounds. And there Musa confessed to Martin how he smuggled cash and what really happened to him. And Musa told him that he wanted to go back home and that Martin should also do the same. But Martin doesn't want to go back to that suffocating life. And the police were actually searching for him, and he ended up fleeing, and this is his life now. And this is where Martin started traveling alone. And Musa went to the hotel where Simon and Bashir were staying, and the receptionist remembered him and gave him the keys to their rooms. And there, Simon started beating him up, asking where the money is. And when Musa told them that he threw it in the water, they didn't believe him, so they started beating him up together. Simon and Bashir, I mean. And at this point, the cops and Martin's wife were looking for him anywhere they could. And they ended up finding him in a bunch of tree branches. And out of happiness and concern, Anne started to look for injuries on his body, but you could tell from Martin's face that he's not really happy to see his wife. Matter of fact, he actually told her that he doesn't want to go back home and that he wanted a divorce. And that's when she slapped him and told him that he was selfish. And while he was having a very intense argument with his wife, the police came and arrested him. He asked Officer Oyvind if he would go to jail, and the officer told him, yeah, there's a really big chance that you will. And together they went to the motel in search of Musa. And there they found out that his partners were not really dead, and Simon told Musa that if he didn't tell him where the money is, he would shoot the officers. And Musa didn't really want that, so he told him where the money is. And Bashir ended up taking the back door and knocking out Oyvind anyways. And after he passed out, he dragged him into their room. And here Martin found a phone in his car, and he thought about what he did to his family. Abandoning them was not really a cool move. So he called and apologized to his wife. And then he looked outside the window and he saw a tied up Musa. And he saw that he was under the control of Simon and Bashir. And soon Oyvind comes out of the motel and unties Martin. And together, Oyvind with his rifle and Martin, like a Viking with his bow and arrow, take down Simon and Bashir. And at the end, Oyvind gets shot and Musa ends up shooting Simon dead. And when Martin got to Oyvind, it was already pretty late and Oyvind just told him to go. And after, Martin and Musa took a ferry to go home. And here we see Martin buying a sandwich and some drinks. And from here we learn that he's finally found whatever it was that he's looking for, even though he didn't enjoy the sandwich because it was dry. And this is how our movie ends. I hope you guys liked our recap. Remember to leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe to our channel. I will see you guys on the next recap. Bye!